Welcome to Missouri University of Science and Technology's Campus Forum on the free application for federal student aid. I'm David Spivey. I'm the Vice Provost for Enrollment Management, and I'd like to introduce Bridget Betts, our Director of Student Financial Assistance, and our moderator, Andy Carriega. We're joined today to talk a little bit about some changes to the FAFSA this year that are coming from the federal government in an effort to really provide you with all the tools you need to prepare in advance while we wait for the FAFSA to open, and give you some information that you will need to really determine how best to financially prepare for your next year. So in this session, we're going to provide you with an overview of those changes that are happening this year to the FAFSA. We're going to tell you how you can start preparing before the FAFSA opens, and then what to do as soon as the FAFSA does open, and then introduce you to a tool that helps prepare you for what your your total package aid from S&T might be as an admitted student. After that session, we're going to open it up for a Q&A, and Andy's going to moderate those questions, and we'll get started here shortly. So with that, I'll turn it over to our Director of Student Financial Assistance, Bridget Betts.
All right. Thank you, David. Welcome, everybody. As David mentioned, I am Bridget Betts. I am the Director of Student Financial Assistance here at Missouri S&T, and I welcome you to tonight's campus forum about the 24-25 FAFSA. Let's get started. So tonight we're going to briefly talk about what the FAFSA is and what you should expect. We're also going to give you some other tips, and as David mentioned, we're going to open it up for questions at the end. Make sure you submit your questions in the Q&A function of the feature in Zoom. The chat is going to be disabled, so we're going to be answering the Q&As from that Q&A feature. So the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It is the federal form that collects demographic and financial information for students and families and is used to determine what kind of federal, state, and institutional need-based aid a student might be eligible for. The information that's entered on the FAFSA is used to calculate the Student Aid Index. This information is then sent to institutions that helps us determine what kind of financial aid to offer. Now, parents, if you have filed the FAFSA in the past, you might have recognized I've already forgotten it. The EFC, the Estimated Financial
Family contribution.
Oh my gosh, the estimated family contribution. The Student Aid Index now replaces the EFC, and my mind is now focused squarely on SAI. So when you file the FAFSA, that is the information that is going to come from the FAFSA as a result of the information that students and parents enter. In order to complete the FAFSA, you must be a U.S. citizen, a permanent resident, or an eligible non-citizen. While the FAFSA is not required, we do highly encourage students and families to complete the FAFSA so that you have the best opportunity to receive the best financial aid package available. Now, you may see that the FAFSA for the 24-25 aid year is being referred to as the Better FAFSA, and this is due to an overhaul of the FAFSA form and process. The Future Act and the FAFSA Simplification Act passed in the recent years are what is causing the federal government to make these changes to the FAFSA and are the biggest changes to the FAFSA in the last 40 years. These changes should make the FAFSA shorter and simpler to complete, and we're expecting that more students are going to be eligible for need-based aid, including Pell Grant, based on these changes. In fact, in Missouri, we are anticipating that we will have an additional 10,000 students eligible for the Pell Grant because of these changes. This should really open the doors for you and help you attend college without worry about finances. Due to the streamlining of these changes, the FAFSA has to be delayed for the upcoming year. So generally, the FAFSA opens October 1, and in future years, that's when it will be open. But for this year, because of these changes, it will be delayed, and the federal student aid has said that it will be open by December 31st. which is only 18 short days away. So hopefully you're preparing for that as we get closer to the end of December. The Missouri S&T's financial, or the FAFSA priority deadline, is February 1, and the state of Missouri's priority deadline for their need-based aid is also February 1. So you're going to have a short amount of time to, once the FAFSA opens, to get that FAFSA completed and get it sent to us so that we can offer you financial aid. So that's one of the reasons why we have this campus forum tonight, so that we can get you prepared to move as quickly as possible once that FAFSA does open December 31st. So now I'm going to get into some of the steps that you can take now as you prepare to complete the FAFSA. The first piece of advice I'd like to give this evening is to know who your contributors to the FAFSA are going to be, and then make sure each one of them has an FSA ID. So a contributor is anyone who is asked to provide information or data on the FAFSA. This will include students' spouse if they're married, parents, and parent spouse if they are married or remarried. The FSA ID then is the username and password that you will use to pull information from the IRS onto the FAFSA, and it will also be used to sign the FAFSA. Each contributor will need to have their own FSA ID. Parents, if you already have one, maybe you completed the FAFSA in the past for yourself or another child in the house, you do not need to create a new one. This would be only for if you have not created one in the past. So students, incoming students, you will need to make sure you have completed one as well. We encourage you to get this set up now, as it will take 1 to 3 days for your FSA ID to be ready for use. So you don't want to try to create it on the same day that you are getting ready to submit the FAFSA, because that will delay how long it takes for you to get that done. We want to make sure that you're ready to go and then it doesn't slow you down. You can set up your FSA ID at any time at studentaid.gov, and you can see the link here on the slide. Your next step is to know which parent, if you're going to be including parents on the FAFSA, which parent to include on that FAFSA. And just so you know, a parent is considered any biological or adoptive parent or step-parent. So grandparents or other caregivers would not be considered parents or contributors to the FAFSA unless they had adopted that student who's going to be on the FAFSA. So this infographic that you see on the screen from Journey to College shows you basically a flow that helps guide you to determine what parent needs to be included on the FAFSA when you get started. As a student, if your biological or adoptive parents are married to each other, they both will be included on the FAFSA. If your parents are not married to each other, but they live together, they're also included, both of them, on the FAFSA. However, if your parents are not married and they do not live together, then you have to make a decision about who's going to be included. To make this decision, you need to look at the finances and who provides the most financial support in the last 12 months for the student. Just a quick note here about child support. This usually comes up with divorced parents. If a parent is paying child support, the parent who is paying the child support gets to count that child support in their financial support that they give to the student when you are trying to consider who provides most financial support. Once you've decided which parent has provided the most financial support in the last 12 months, that's the parent that's going to be on the FAFSA. If that particular parent is remarried, then both the parent and the step-parent is included on the FAFSA. If that parent is not remarried, it's just that parent by themselves. So as you start gathering information to prepare to complete the FAFSA at the end of December, here are some additional information and additional items that you're going to need to provide or to collect in order to complete the FAFSA quickly. So you'll want to know Missouri S&T's FAFSA code, and you can see it on the screen. It's 002517. Entering this code on the FAFSA ensures that your information will get to S&T and we can offer you financial aid. If you don't include our code, then we won't be able to offer you anything until you do. You're also going to need to know the Social Security number of your contributors, so each of your contributors. You'll also need to know have available all of the federal tax information and W-2s for each one of the contributors. For the 24-25 age year, the tax information you're collecting is for 2022, so you want to make sure you have that prepared. And then you'll want to make sure that you have all the contributors' FSA IDs that you previously set up, because that's what you will need to sign the FAFSA. We know as an interested student, you're going to send your FAFSA to S&T, but you can also send your FAFSA to up to 20 institutions. Normally, if you do not include the institutions you're interested in on your first submission, you can go back in and make changes to your FAFSA to include any additional institutions. However, because of the delay of the FAFSA, you're not actually going to be able to make any corrections until probably February. So you want to make sure that you have gathered all of the institutions you want to send it to, including S&T, before you start filing the FAFSA, so you make sure you get it to us up front. Now I'm going to go over some things that you should expect once you get started on the FAFSA that opens on December 31st. The first thing you need to know is that the FAFSA is role-based, meaning that each contributor is going to have their own role and their own section to complete. One contributor cannot complete the other contributor's information. That means a parent or a student can start the FAFSA, and then the other contributor will be able to add their information in their own separate section. Now, whomever starts the FAFSA, once that contributor is done with their section, they will invite the other contributors to complete their own portions. To invite a contributor to the FAFSA, you need their Social Security number, their date of birth, and an email address. So I would recommend that you have the parent start out completing the FAFSA, because it's more likely that a parent as a contributor is going to know the student's Social Security number and date of birth and email versus a student knowing the parent's Social Security number, date of birth, and email. So to make things simpler, we would suggest the parents start that process. It's also important to know that all contributors must try to complete their portions as soon as they are invited, because the FAFSA is, if it's not fully completed and submitted within 45 days, any information that had been provided up to that 45-day point will be discarded and you'll have to start over. So you'll want to plan it out together, sit down with all the contributors and plan out a time and make sure it's done as close to each other as possible, so that you don't have to redo any work that you started. The next thing that contributors will need to navigate is the financial sections of the FAFSA and providing consent. Each contributor will be required to provide consent for their federal tax information to be included on the FAFSA from the IRS. Contributors are also providing consent for this data to then be shared with the Department of Education and the institutions that they select on the FAFSA. Also, even if a contributor did not file a tax return, as many students may not have filed a tax return in 2022, they would still need to consent to share the fact that they did not file. So every contributor is going to consent when they complete the FAFSA. It is important to note that each contributor will need to provide consent. If consent is not given by any one of the contributors, the student will not be eligible to receive federal aid, which is one of the purposes of completing the FAFSA. So all contributors need to agree to consent before getting started. And really, that should be all there is to it. It should be simple and quick once you finally get in there and get it taken care of. Once the FAFSA is complete, the student is going to receive a confirmation email. And in that confirmation email, you're going to get that student aid index number that I talked about at the beginning, but you're also going to be able to see what financial federal aid you might be eligible to receive from your FAFSA submission. It is important to note, due to the delay, though, that U.S. Department of Education does not plan to send your FAFSA to any institutions until the end of January. So even though you might get a confirmation email showing that it's completed, S&T and any other institution will not know if you completed your FAFSA until the end of January. But Once we do know that you have filed the FAFSA and we have received it, we're going to send you an email to your S&T email letting you know that we received it and what your next steps are. So you should be checking your email, your S&T email, towards the end of January in order to prepare for that. Also, you should expect to receive a financial aid offer letter from us in the mail in early March based on your FAFSA information. You'll want to make sure you file your FAFSA by February 1 so that you can get that information as quickly as it is available. If you are interested now, though, in knowing what aid you might be eligible for, the U.S. Department of Education does have a financial aid estimator. This tool gives you a quick estimate of the federal aid as if you were filing the FAFSA right now. Also, if you're an admitted student to S&T, you can report this information to us and we will send you a preliminary offer letter that details the information that you received from the Department of Education in terms of what federal aid you might be eligible for, combined with any S&T scholarships we've been able to offer you to date. That letter should then help you have a full financial aid estimate to help you decide where you might attend, and hopefully that is Missouri S&T. If you are interested, there are instructions here on the slide, but you can also find it on our website at sfa.mst.edu/FAFSA. You should have also received an email or two from us detailing these instructions. And so I do hope that if you are interested that you complete that process so we can get you that preliminary financial aid information. While anyone can complete the financial aid estimator, this preliminary award offer is only available to those who are admitted to S&T. So if you've not been admitted yet, now's your chance to apply. You are encouraged to apply for admission at apply.mst.edu. There is no application fee to apply, so there's no harm in getting that done and taken care of. The financial aid estimator, however, does not replace the FAFSA. This is only to give you a tool right now to start estimating what your financial aid may be. You are still, if you are looking to receive federal, state, and institutional need-based aid, you are still needing to complete that FAFSA once it opens, and we do encourage you to get it done by February 1st. I've talked a lot of information tonight, and we're going to open it up for questions here in a minute. But once that FAFSA does open, you may get in there and you may have additional questions as you actually see what the information being requested is. So we're going to have several opportunities for you to get that assistance in January, and you can see this information here. But we will also be sending you links with invites to these events so that you can sign up and get registered for this help. Admissions, for example, is going to be hosting the Student Financial Assistance Office in 2 virtual sessions on January 3rd and January 17th at 6 p.m. Central Time. This is going to give you information about how to complete the FAFSA now that the FAFSA is open by that point, and we can answer any questions that you might have as you have tried to complete the FAFSA. Also, the Missouri Association for Student Financial Aid Personnel, or MASFAP, is hosting a week of action in the state of Missouri where financial aid professionals, including myself and others from S&T, will be available to meet with you virtually one-on-one during the evenings of January 8th through 11th from 5:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Central Time. Regardless of where you will attend college, if you are a Missouri resident, you are welcome to join us during this week of action and speak with any number of financial aid professionals to get your questions answered regarding the FAFSA submission. And lastly, we are going to be hosting some in-person events on our campus, predominantly for our current students. However, we do have a Saturday, January 20th event that you might be interested in. If you are close to campus and you are going to be around that weekend and you would like to really sit down and have an in-person conversation and sit down in one of our computer labs, that might be an event that you can pop in and join. So again, that's January 20th from 1 to 4 p.m. Okay, so now we have gotten to the point where we are going to open it up for questions. Again, that was a lot of information that I shared with you. But I'm hoping that we gave you some things to start working on and to prepare for so that you can get that FAFSA completed quickly. At this point, I welcome any questions that you might have for me.
Okay, we do have a few questions that have come in already.
Awesome.
Reminder, if you do have questions, to please complete the, to put them in the Q&A section of the Zoom. So quickly, there was one question. If you could repeat the web address for the estimator, that was one question that came
Yes,
up.
you can find all of this information at studentaid.gov. And when you go to studentaid.gov, you'll be able to search for Federal Student Aid Estimator. You can find the link directly on our webpage at sfa.mst.edu/FAFSA.
Very good. Another question has to do with this family's tax returns for 2022. Due to an inheritance from a parent who passed, their income was almost double of their normal income. And so the adjusted income for 2022 shows that they do not need aid, but it was not a normal year. So is there any way to have that taken into consideration? How would that situation be addressed?
That's an excellent question. So you will file the FAFSA as normal using that income as part of your 22 taxes. You're going to be pulling it directly from the IRS. So there's nothing that you're going to be entering manually. Once the FAFSA is submitted and the school has had a chance to receive it, then what sounds like in your situation is going to be considered a professional judgment or a special circumstance review. That is where the financial aid office can look at your specific situation and, if necessary, make adjustments to the FAFSA from our end to help the student to make sure that we are accounting for what your actual financial situation will be for the upcoming year. So you will be able to find more information on the financial aid website, and you can reach out to the financial aid office after we have received the FAFSA and after you get notice from us that we have it. Then we can talk about the next steps.
Very good. Another question that's come in is, do you need to fill out the FAFSA before applying for other S&T scholarships?
No, absolutely not. You can apply. They're not related. So you can apply for scholarships now and then apply for the FAFSA when it opens, or you can apply for scholarships now, then the FAFSA, and then more scholarships if you'd like. We would encourage you to do both. And since the FAFSA is not open yet, now's a good time to apply for scholarships.
Very good. Another question about FAFSA is, the submission of FAFSA is electronically, but does a hard copy need to be sent by February 1st?
No, the FAFSA is electronic, and so you are going to be submitting it electronically once all of the contributors have entered their information. It will be submitted electronically, and there is no hard copy signature or anything like that. It goes directly to the Department of Education.
What is the turnaround time after completing the S&T form, so we have some idea of assistance?
Yeah, it usually takes about 1 to 2 business days after we have received your request to get you the information for the preliminary financial aid offer. You do want to make sure that if you are filling out that form that you fully complete it, because we will need all the 5 pieces of information that we've requested in that form to make a financial aid offer to you.
And will this presentation be shared with attendees after the event?
Yes, it will.
Do parents need to know their 401k status?
So asset questions will be asked on the FAFSA. So yes, they may need to know that information, but it may depend on the family situation. I would say that might be a good question to contact the financial aid office, and I'll have contact information at the end that we can follow up and make sure that we give you the correct information there.
Very good. Still a few more questions coming in here. What is adjusted income and how is adjusted income calculated?
So the adjusted gross income is what shows up on your tax return. And so it is defined by the IRS regulations in terms of what they include in the adjusted gross income. This will include things such as your income earned from work, any interest earned, business income, that kind of thing. Anything that might show up on your tax return that would add up to the adjusted gross income, or AGI.
Very good. One question comes in about whether parents can start the FAFSA. This individual says they've heard in other countries it has to be the student who starts the process, then invites other contributors. But is it the parent? The parent can start the FAFSA, the student, or how does that work?
Yep, either the parent or the student can start, but we would recommend that the parent start it only because you have to invite the other contributor to add their information, and students rarely know their parent's social security number, date of birth, or email address, and so it might be easier if the parent starts it. However, if you're both sitting together and working on it, the student can absolutely start that, and you can provide the information for them to invite you.
Very good. How does someone account for their 529, and will it affect the FAFSA index?
That information will be, that's another question that I would encourage you to reach out to the financial aid office so we can review your situation. If it is considered an asset, that question will be a part of the asset questions when you are entering your information on the FAFSA.
Very good. Now, what about if parents are located internationally? They're living abroad, but the applicant is a U.S. citizen. How will that be addressed or considered?
So the parents are still required to be contributors on the FAFSA if the student is considered a dependent student. If the parents, for example, do not have a social security number, they can still create an FSA ID without a social security number. This didn't used to be the case, but it is now. So I would encourage you to get that taken care of. Also, there's some other additional questions related if you still have to consent to provide information on the FAFSA. However, if you did not file a U.S. tax return, no information will be provided there, and there will be some additional questions for you. But that information will still be reported on the FAFSA, even if the parents are not in the U.S.
Another question about adjusted gross income here. Mm-hmm. Is the AGI calculated before deductions? And is it also called taxable income on the RS Form 1040?
It will specifically spell out adjusted gross income, so it would be before tax deductions.
Very good. Question about the February 1st deadline, mm-hmm. and that's the priority deadline. What happens if you miss that deadline? Is there a penalty, or what happens in that case?
So we have a FAFSA priority deadline because we have some funds that we have a small amount of money in. Those funds are things like federal work study or another federal supplemental grant that we can offer. And we have a small amount of money in, and we award it to those who file by the priority deadline. Now, if you file after the priority deadline, you would be considered as funds are available, but it's possible that we would have awarded all of those funds by that point. Also, if you are in the state of Missouri and your adjusted gross income is less than $70,000, you might qualify for our Solving for Tomorrow scholarship, which covers your remaining tuition, and that also has a February 1 deadline. So you would want to make sure that you are completing that FAFSA as quickly as possible.
Very good. Can a parent and student share the same FSA ID?
No, they cannot. Each contributor is going to have their own FSA ID, and it is important that you do not share the email address that's attached to that FSA ID or the same phone number. Your FSA ID is connected to your Social Security number and your date of birth and goes through the Social Security Administration match, and so that is unique to you. If you are using that FSA ID and maybe you have forgotten your password, it is going to go through your security questions. And so those need to be unique to each individual person to avoid any concerns or confusion. If it's not set up correctly and that email address maybe is being used by more than one FSA ID, you won't be able to adequately sign that FAFSA and get it submitted.
Will I need my parents' information?
So you will need your parents' information if you are going to be considered a dependent student. A dependent student is anybody who is less than 20 or younger than 24, not married, doesn't have kids, not a veteran. If you can say yes to any of those questions and you are an independent student, then your information is all that will be needed on the FAFSA, and your spouse's information if you are married. But parents would only be included if you're considered a dependent student.
Very good. Here's a question about what happens if a contributor does not want to provide consent.
Unfortunately, every single contributor must provide consent. Otherwise, the student is not eligible for federal aid. Now, we are told that you should be able to complete the FAFSA without consenting. However, it's going to deem the student ineligible, and so there may not be a purpose to completing it if they're not going to be eligible for federal aid.
Very good. Well, we've gone through all the questions that we've received so far in the Q&A. Again, I'd encourage if anyone in the audience has other questions to please share those. Oh, there's one that just came through. So once I submit the FAFSA, how long will it take to get a response from either S&T or the Department of Education?
So Department of Education should give you within 1 to 2 business days, is our understanding, a confirmation email that it is submitted and what your student aid index is and what possible federal aid you might be eligible for. In January, that's at the end of January, that's when the Department of Education is going to send that information to the school, and then that's when we will reach out to you to let you know we received it. At that same time that the institutions get that information, you will also get another communication from the Department of Education called the Financial Aid Summary, or Financial Aid Status Summary, where it will give you the output of what you entered on the FAFSA. You won't get that immediately due to this delay, but you will get it at the end of January at the same time institutions do.
Just to confirm, this person asks, I can't start working on the FAFSA until December 31st. Is that correct?
That's correct. Because of the delay, the Department of Education has said that it will be open by December 31st. That is the latest by law that they can delay it. It's possible that it'll be open earlier, but we are anticipating it will be December 31st as they have indicated.
And is there anything that students or parents can do before December 31st to prepare for that?
Yep. I would encourage you to make sure each contributor has an FSA ID set up. Make sure you know who the contributors are. And then go ahead and get all the documentation that we outlined, including all of your 2022 tax information. So that is ready for you whenever the FAFSA does open.
If you have 2 children in college, do you need both students to complete portions of the FAFSA?
So the FAFSA is for a student and their contributors. So a student sibling is not going to be considered a contributor on their FAFSA. You are going to have 2 separate FAFSAs to complete though, one for each child.
After creating a login and password, your information must be verified by Social Security. Do you then receive an email with your ID number, or do you log in to get it?
So you're going to set up your username and password when you set up your FSA ID. So you will know what your username and password is. I'm hoping that you get an email immediately after or within 1 to 3 days telling you it's ready to use. But if it's not, you need to at least wait 3 days before you try to use it. But you should know your username and password because you set it up as soon as you set it up during that process.
Do I apply for a new ID each year, or is the same? Can I use the same ID? How long is it good for?
That FSA ID is with you forever. It's what you're going to use to complete the FAFSA each year. It's also what you're going to use to sign any federal documents with the Department of Education, such as promissory notes or entrance counseling or things like that.
Okay, here's a question from a mother. My son filed last year under his dad. Now I'm filling it out. Can my son use his old information and I add my account?
Yes, the student will have their own FSA ID no matter who their parent or contributor was in the past. So their information will stay the same, and then the new parent will create their own FSA ID to add their information now.
And another question again, just asking, the application opens December 31st, correct?
That's correct. That's the anticipation.
Anticipated date.
Yep.
Very good. Okay, we don't have any further questions at this time, but we still have a little bit of time left. So I don't know if there's anything else, Bridget or David, that you might want to discuss with this group while we have a little bit of a lull.
Sure. I'd just like to extend our help if you ever need it. Our Office of Student Financial Assistance is here. You have a face with the name. Bridget Betts and her team are wonderful advocates for our students. Please reach out if you have any questions. This is an opportunity for you to get your questions answered, to not be afraid of the process, to know that any school within the UM system, but also S&T, is really here to help you in this process. It should also not slow you down on applying to a university. So if you're still in that sort of discovery phase of applying to universities, we've heard that some high school counselors are saying, just wait to apply until the FAFSA is open. And so that's a fallacy, right? You can absolutely apply to a university for admission, and we don't want that to be a hindrance to you either. So do your due diligence, do your discovery, apply to the institutions that you want to go to, apply to S&T, reach out to those financial aid offices that are out there. We are here to help. So it's what we do. It's what we love doing. It's why we're in education. So please make use of the resources that are here at S&T. We'd love to talk to you.
Looks like we're getting a couple more questions coming in here.
All right.
So one has to do with tax information. Will that be tax information be auto-populated as in years past? Will that happen?
It'll actually be even better than in previous years. Excuse me. So on previous iterations of FAFSAs, if you ever completed those, so sorry. Got that frog. So you had to use the data retrieval tool and pull information from the IRS and agree to that. But it only pulled like a handful of fields. It did not pull all of the information that the IRS has. Well, due to the FAFSA Simplification Act, it is making it a more streamlined process with the IRS using a direct data exchange, so it pulls more information from the IRS and less that the families have to enter onto the FAFSA. So it's going to be actually even better than it was in the past.
Very good. So if we have any further questions after this forum, where do we go? How do we ask those questions?
So I put my contact information on the slide here. The Financial Aid Office is here to help you. As David mentioned, we are ready and available. We've got things happening all month of January and beyond that. And so we want to make sure that we reduce any barriers that you might have to getting that FAFSA done and getting your financial aid offered. So you can see our contact information. The sfa@mst.edu is our email address. And our phone number is 573-341-4282. Please reach out to us. We want to help you.
Very good. And follow-up question, I think you've just answered that, is do we contact Financial Aid Office for scholarship help?
Yep, that too. Any kind of financial aid, scholarships, grants, loans, that goes through the Financial Aid Office.
This question is, my wife and I are married and we file taxes jointly, and we are the biological parents of an S&T student. Our student does not have any earned income and is a dependent on our return. How many FSA IDs do we get?
So the student will need one, and and one parent will need one because you're married filing jointly. In any other situation, if you were not filing jointly, then both parents would need an FSA ID. But because you are married filing jointly, you only need one.
Very good. And is there an advantage to submitting sooner rather than later?
The only advantage is if you submit before February 1, then you're considered for all the aid that we have a limited amount of money in. So you would want to submit before February 1, but there is no difference in submitting December 31st versus January 30th.
Very good. So for FAFSA purposes, what is dependency?
So dependency is if whether or not you are a dependent of your parent. For FAFSA purposes, in order to be a dependent of your parent, you are less or younger, I keep saying less than, younger than 24, you are not married, you don't have children of your own or dependents, you're not a veteran, those students would be considered a dependent student. The majority of S&T students are considered dependent students as undergraduates, and so most likely you would be considered a dependent student as well.
And here's an example. A student who does not live with a parent but lives in Missouri with temporary guardians. Is that also a dependency?
So if you are under legal guardianship, that question will be asked on the FAFSA, and you will be then considered an independent student because you're under legal guardianship and not with your parents. So then only the student's information will need to be included on the FAFSA in that situation.
And what is the maximum aid that one is eligible for?
So if your student aid index is negative 1,500 to 0, somewhere in that range, when you complete the FAFSA, you most likely will be eligible for a federal Pell Grant, and the maximum federal Pell Grant is $7,395 right now. We will know more based on Congress and what the national budget is as we get closer to the beginning of February, and whether or not that Pell Grant will be increased or not. But right now, the maximum Pell is $7,395. If you are max Pell eligible, you might be eligible for other need-based aid as well. So it can stack on top of that Pell Grant.
And if my son is employed, he also has to provide his tax info, correct?
Yep, if he was employed in 2022, then he would consent to have the IRS provide that information to the FAFSA. Now, if he was not employed in 2022 or did not file taxes in 2022, he would still have to consent to allow that information on the FAFSA, but it would not pull anything because there was no information filed with the IRS.
My child went through the available questions and doesn't think any of them apply to him. What should I advise him?
You might, I don't know if I understand that question as far as the available questions. So perhaps they can provide a little more clarity to that question.
Okay, so we'll wait and see if they can provide more clarity in the Q&A here. So we go through a couple of other questions here. As we're awarded scholarships, how does this affect FAFSA amount?
So the amount that you're offered from the federal government in terms of grant aid will not change depending on if you get more scholarships from the institution. Your grant aid will most likely be the same. Now, if you receive any kind of federal loans, those might be reduced as you receive more scholarships, but that's a good thing. You're getting more free aid versus the aid that you have to borrow and repay. I would say that you want to apply for as many scholarships as you can, and you can do that at S&T at scholarships.mst.edu. We've awarded quite a bit already, but we will continue to award through our scholarship deadline, which is also February 1.
Okay. Okay, a clarification on that previous question. Then he doesn't think that any of the scholarships apply to him. My child went through the available questions and doesn't think any of the scholarships apply to him. What should I advise him?
Got it. It's about the scholarship database. So scholarships.mst.edu is our scholarship database. It asks students a series of questions. They can answer as few or as many as they want. The more they answer, the more scholarships they may get matched to. Now, 20% of those scholarships may have an application, and it may be something that a student sees based on the questions that they answer. However, 80% of the scholarships that are in that database are direct awards. So the student may not see that the questions answered are making them eligible for those awards because there's no application for them to complete. But it's possible that they are matched to other scholarships that they may not know about yet until we start awarding them through February 1. I would say that the student needs to go in periodically, see if there's any additional questions to answer, any additional applications to apply to, and just keep checking back.
We already have 2 FSA numbers, but filed jointly. Now what do we do?
That's okay. It's good that you each have an FSA ID, just in case one of you needs it in the future. So that's okay. Only one contributor from the married filing jointly needs to sign. So you would just choose which one that is.
And speaking of contributors, as a parent contributor, does that mean that completing the FAFSA means that I'm required to pay for my child's college education?
A contributor means that you're contributing your information and your data from the IRS to the FAFSA. It does not mean that you are required to contribute financially to the student's education.
And a question again on the name of the website for scholarships, the database?
Scholarships.mst.edu is our database website.
Very good. Well, once again, we are at a pause, I think. We still have, looks like 8 or 9 minutes left this evening. So if anyone has any final questions or final thoughts, please submit. Otherwise, if there are any other comments, David, that you might want to offer?
We really appreciate the time you've spent with us tonight. This is such a pleasure to be able to sit in front of you and talk to you and answer your questions and guide you through this process. So again, do not hesitate to reach out. We are always here to help at S&T, and we look forward to welcoming you as a new minor.
All right. I think those are all the questions that we have
All right.
this evening.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I really do appreciate it. Again, if you have a question that you weren't able to ask, please reach out to the financial aid office. We're here to help, and I look forward to seeing you all on campus soon. Thank you.